The other aspect that we always get checked out when we go to the doctor is our blood pressure. What do we need to know about this?
So, okay, blood pressure is an extremely important part of your health that you need to have checked. And it's also one of the reasons it's important to go into the doctor. I mean, during, COVID, when we were used to doing virtual visits, it's all great, but a lot of people weren't getting their basic physical exam done. You're not getting your basic blood pressure checked. And it's one of your vital signs. It's a very important thing to know. So, what is blood pressure? So, blood pressure is essentially the pressure exerted against the walls of your against the walls of your blood vessels. So when we think about blood pressure, it's often two numbers you hear. So 120 over 80 or 140 over 90. So the top numbers are systolic blood pressure and the bottom numbers are diastolic blood pressure. So the systolic blood pressure is the pressure against our artery walls when our heart contracts, beats. Okay, so it's higher number. The diastolic blood pressure is the pressure in our blood vessels when our heart is between beats, so when our heart is relaxed. So that's why you get the two numbers. Okay, so that's one thing to understand. The pulse pressure is the systolic minus the diastolic. But that's just something interesting. So, if, for example, if your blood pressure is 120 over 80, your systolic is 120, your diastolic is 80, and your pulse pressure is 40. Okay.
I was gonna say 40.
There we go. Our math coming in handy. So, yeah, so that's what it is. And generally speaking, the higher your pulse pressure, so that the difference, the less healthy could be the more increased risk for heart disease you have. So, let's say you're 140 over 60, you have a high pulse pressure. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyhow, let's just focus on blood pressure. So, what's the ideal blood pressure? Anything average blood pressure is 120 over 80. Anything under that, anything lower that is better as long as you're not dizzy. Okay, so if your blood pressure is 100 over 60 and you feel great, that's a great blood pressure. If the top number is between 120 and 130, that's elevated blood pressure. Okay, between 130 and 140 on the top and 80 on the 90 in the bottom is stage 1 hypertension. And stage 2 hypertension is when you're above 140 over 90. So when I went to medical school, we just learned hypertension. So high tension, high pressure, high blood pressure is over 140 over 90. And now they've decreased what's considered high blood pressure because it's a silent killer, meaning that a lot of people walk around with high blood pressure and they don't have symptoms. So they don't know their blood pressure is high because it's asymptomatic unless it's skyrocketed. But the longer you have high blood pressure, the more pressure you're doing on your artery walls, the more damage you're doing. The more likely you are to weaken them, the more likely you are to have them form a clot. And these are the things that increase our risk for stroke and increase our risk for heart attack. So hypertension is a risk factor, and they're actually seeing for the first time in younger people, so less than 65, an increase in stroke. And it could be that a lot of young people are walking around with high blood pressure without realizing it. So, I always think about all these wearables, like people are wearing an Apple Watch and people are wearing an Oura Ring, and we're tracking all these things like our sleep and our steps. But what's more important to track is your blood pressure. And it's fairly easy to buy a blood pressure cuff. You just go to the pharmacy, you can purchase one. Some of your insurance plans might cover it. And you can take your own blood pressure at home. You put your arm on a table, you put it around you, you press the button, and it will tell you what your blood pressure is. And if you're noticing that it's consistently and when I say consistently, because you never want to do anything on a one-off, because it could be affected by if you're really stressed out or if you've just had a huge cup of coffee or things like that. But if it's consistently elevated, then it's something you definitely want to talk to your doctor about.